Preye. Preye was trying her best not to fall asleep in class. Every single thing about school was boring to her. It even showed in her grades. She was doing so poorly in school. In fact, she knew in her heart that school just wasn't for her. Instead, she wanted to be a music star. She was a talented singer, so she knew she would make it just like the popular Nigerian artist she looked up to. She was only in school to please her father anyway. She just had to see it through till the end. Otherwise, she would never hear the end of it. Tamna Preye Briggs was a third-year business admin student, a Port Harcourt girl. She was also the first child of two children. She was actually the only girl, and her younger brother was in boarding school. Even though she was the only girl, Preye was a tomboy with a beautiful dark complexion, a slim build, and short dark hair. She had more male friends than female ones and would always hang out with the guys to play soccer or attend night parties. It was undeniable though. Preye had the voice of an angel. It was one of the feminine features she wasn't afraid to show. She was a very talented singer, and everyone would always get her to sing whenever she came around them. She was hilarious and friendly. She had a very inviting personality. One day, when Preye returned home from school, she met her father in the living room. She had a very rough relationship with her father. He never understood her. He hated the fact that she only hung out with male friends all the time. He was also irritated by the way she dressed like a boy. To add to this, he was also very disappointed at her performance in school. Preye's father was a renowned lecturer of the university. He held a PhD and several awards for his academic achievements. He couldn't understand why his first child did so horribly in school. For these reasons, Preye never saw eye to eye with her father. "And where are you coming from at this time of the night?" Dr. Briggs asked. "I had some meetings with my friends," Preye said quietly. "Of course. When your mates are studying, preparing for their future, you are here gallivanting up and down with those stupid friends of yours. What do you think you will amount to if you continue this way? Eh? Who do you think will even marry you with the way you are going in your life?" Preye just stood there, folding her hands with an unbothered expression. "My friend, get inside and get out of my sight," he said, dismissing Preye. She ran instantly to her room, trying to hold back the tears in her eyes. As soon as she entered her room, she burst out in tears. She always tried to act tough whenever he spoke that way to her, but the truth was that his words cut deeper than a knife. They hurt her so much that she decided to put up a shield. The more he verbally attacked her, the more she stayed away from him. She collapsed on her bed and quickly pulled out the picture of her late mother and held it close to her chest. "I miss you, Mommy. I really miss you," she said. She cried that entire night until she eventually fell asleep. The next morning, Preye left the house once again. It was a Saturday and she was planning to meet up with a bunch of her friends in the campus area. As she came down from the bus stop, she heard a guy call out to her, "My friend," but she paid no mind to him. It was common for random guys in the university area to call out to girls on the streets. It was almost a part of the uni culture. She couldn't even make out his face, but only saw that he wore a blue shirt. Preye was supposed to meet up with the guys outside a local school eatery. She walked down to the eatery and found none of her friends there, so she picked up her phone to call one of them. "Hello Collins, how far? I'm just outside Can Chop Eatery now and you guys aren't here. The plan was to meet up at 1:30 p.m. It's almost like 2:15 p.m. now. Where are you guys?" PP, don't be angry. The guys and I are running late. No vex. We'll be there in the next 20 minutes max. African man time indeed. Okay, let your 20 minutes be 20 minutes. I'm waiting for you guys. She put down the phone and took a seat on the bench close by. Within 5 minutes, she noticed a beige-colored car driving back and forth. She assumed it was probably strangers looking for directions. Finally, the car came to a stop and the person inside the car beckoned for Preye to come. She thought nothing of it, feeling like he was only calling her to ask for directions. So she drew near to the car. As she approached the car, she asked, "Yeah, Oga, how can I help you? Where are you looking for?" Immediately she said this, the man pulled out a gun and aimed it at her. "Shebi, all you girls think you are something in this university. Why didn't you answer me when I called you, eh? Do you know who I am?" Preye was filled with so much fear she couldn't even speak. "They call me Omnius One. I run this school. No girl has the audacity to turn me down. Enter this car now." Preye recognized that name. She had only heard of Omnius One, the ringleader of the notorious cult group terrorizing the university. She had never met him or seen his face before. As she entered the back seat of the car, where he was, he handed the gun to the person in the driver's side, who continued to point it at her. Omnius One forcefully removed Preye's trousers, ripped her underwear away and raped her in the back seat of that car. Out of fear for her life, she didn't even fight back. When he was finished, he pushed her out of the car and the two men drove off. She was not unconscious, but she just laid there on the ground, unable to believe what just happened to her. She laid there a total of 5 minutes before people started passing by and rushing to her. Was she just raped? What exactly just happened to her? She thought. Finally, when it was clear what had happened, she just began to cry as the people carried her to the university hospital. Life had just taken a very sharp turn. How would she be able to live after this? After Preye had been taken to the hospital, her friends eventually came to see her. Most of them were speechless, not knowing what to say or how to process the ordeal. Some blamed themselves for not showing up earlier, knowing that if they were around, they could have protected her. All the same, it was already too late. There was nothing anyone could do that would change what just happened. Preye spent most of the time in the hospital not saying anything and recoiling from anyone who tried to touch her, even the doctors and nurses. After 4 days of not speaking and reoccurring nightmares, Preye finally said something. "Where's my mother? Mommy?" She began to cry profusely as she longed for her late mother's comfort. The people around her drew near to comfort her. Preye was very close to her mother. She used to tell her everything. They were like best friends. Her mother was also a beautiful singer. This is actually where Preye got her singing from. They both shared a strong bond through music. One day, Preye's mother started feeling severe pains around her chest, and over some months, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. They tried everything, but nothing worked. There was little the healthcare system in Nigeria could do to save her life. One day, early in the morning, on a Sunday, she breathed her last and she was gone. Preye never really recovered after that. Things began to change. She distanced herself from all her female friends because they reminded her too much of her mother and how close they were. She started dressing more like a boy and hanging out with the boys. It was like this was her own coping mechanism. Her mother's death is the core reason why her relationship with her father deteriorated to this point. The event of this rape created a new wound right beside the scar from her mother's death. After a few days, Preye left the university hospital. She could not get the rape out of her mind. She still felt him touching her and taking advantage of her. It was a horrible feeling that haunted her everywhere she went. When she got home, her father was not there. Apparently, he had traveled and would return later that afternoon. She was unsure whether or not anyone had informed him of what happened to her. What would he think? How would he react? She wondered. The house all of a sudden seemed smaller than usual, and she sat in her room alone. So many thoughts ran through her mind. She cried so much that she felt she had no more tears to cry. She held onto her mother's picture, sobbing and sobbing. She felt repulsive to herself and would take a bath repeatedly, hoping to cleanse herself from feeling so dirty. The grief and the pain wouldn't stop flooding her mind. She replayed his voice in her head over and over again as he called her names, made her feel worthless while he defiled her. No matter how much she tried to distract herself, the thoughts would not end. She had been home now about 3 hours, still battling her mind and the trauma from the ordeal. She decided to turn on her radio, hoping that it would take her mind off everything. As she turned up the volume, she heard the radio presenter speaking. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your boy Timothy. Welcome back to the Voice of the People. Today I have a very important guest in my company. Last week we had an upcoming artist as our guest speaker, but today we have a pastor. Isn't that an interesting one? I'd like to present to you Pastor Elemelu of Yeshua Parish, Port Harcourt. Pastor Elemelu is a very young man of God, very respected in his community. He has done a lot for the people through his charitable works. Today, Pastor Elemelu and I will be discussing on the topic, what the people really need. Yes, that is what the people really need. So, Pastor, we have seen how the country is. We see the killings, the violence, the continuous injustice that the people face from the government every day. No lights, no jobs, pain everywhere. So the question is, what do the people really need right now? There was a small pause, and then the pastor began to speak. Thank you, my brother, for this opportunity to be on this platform. I'm very grateful. To answer your question, when God was speaking to the Israelites in Isaiah 1:1-15, he spoke to them about the deplorable state of their nation. But he didn't stop there. In verse 18 and 19, he told them that there was a way out of that condition. It was in their hands. Yes, the nation was in a pitiable and disappointing position, but you see, God still offered himself to change things. God cannot force the people to do what is right, but he will make the way known to us. To cut to the point, the people need the restoration that God offers. Without our consent and cooperation to receive that restoration, I am afraid it may not come. The word restoration just kept ringing in her mind, even after the broadcast on the radio. She tried to make some food to eat but couldn't even eat anything at all. She had no appetite. She continued throughout the day to battle the thoughts in her mind, but somehow the word restoration would pop up in the middle of all those thoughts. She eventually fell asleep. By the time she woke up, it was 11 p.m. She must have been extremely exhausted. She stood up to use the bathroom and eventually decided to grab a glass of water. When she passed the living room, she ran into her father. He must have returned from his journey while she was still asleep. At first, they both didn't say a word to each other until he finally spoke. So you are back, he said, looking at her shamefully. I heard what happened. He shook his head and continued. I warned you, didn't I? Don't hang around these boys, and you refused. Just look at what you have done to yourself. He put his hand on his head and shifted his gaze to the ceiling. You are nothing like your mother. She was elegant, beautiful, behaved like a responsible woman. But here you are, a disgrace, a shame to me. Even though Preye had never seen eye to eye with her father, she needed him at this time, in these chilling and daunting moments. Instead, she received this harsh and vicious criticism. She tried to be strong while he spoke, but it was all too much for her. She was broken and she needed a father's love to soothe her pain. Daddy was all she could muster. She began to cry and her tears were uncontrollable. Expecting that her father's heart would be moved and that he would see the pain she was passing through, she continued crying. Instead, he just walked away, leaving her in the living room, suffering alone in her pain. She ran back to her room, threw the covers above herself and cried all that night until she had no strength to cry again. Still, Amid her tears, she kept hearing the word restoration. She pushed it away, knowing that restoration was impossible for her. She had been too damaged, too broken to be restored. The next morning, Preye was awakened by sudden and intense suicidal thoughts. Several voices kept speaking to her at once, telling her to end her life. They were extremely overwhelming. Without thought, she quickly took a bath, freshened up herself, and left the house. She didn't know where she was going, but she only needed to keep the voices out of her head. During her walk, she decided to take a seat on a street bench. She sat there staring blankly into space. The voices came again, instantly telling her to walk into the middle of the road and get hit by a vehicle. "You can be with your mother," the voices would say. She put her hand over her head and fought back the tears in her eyes. Suddenly, a young woman came and sat beside her, but Preye did not look at her. "Hi there," the young woman said. As Preye looked up at her, she saw that she had a gentle smile on her face and a Bible in her hand. She knew that she was one of these church people. She was not interested in listening to anything she had to say. If God was there, why would He allow her mother to die? Why would He allow her to get raped and feel this immense pain that she felt? "Hi, good morning. My name is Bola Tito. I was just standing over there and immediately you came to sit here. I just knew I needed to speak to you." Preye said nothing. There was an awkward silence. "God can restore you," Bola Tito said. There, that word was again. "You don't understand what I've been through. Your God cannot restore me. He cannot give me back what I have lost," Preye said. Bola Tito put her head down and began to speak. "I was also raped 2 years ago. I was actually drugged by my friend and raped by 3 men in a club in Lagos." Preye was astonished. How did you know that I was raped?" "God sometimes tells me things about people so that He can help them. The moment I saw you, God told me what happened to you and He wants to help you." Preye began to cry. Why did He allow this to happen to me? How could He stand by and allow this to happen? Bola Tito then put her arms around her. "I don't have all the answers, but I know that God is not responsible for the evil that men do. The wickedness of man's heart is the problem, not God. But see, God offers restoration, healing, peace, progress. You don't have to stay in this broken state. When Jesus died on the cross, He had you in mind. I know because I've been exactly where you are. All I wanted to do was kill myself after it happened. But Jesus came to me. He healed me. He gave me new meaning to life." She paused. "Sorry, I didn't even ask your name." "It's Preye. Preye, I know how you feel, but you have to choose not to be broken anymore. You have to choose to heal. Let Jesus come in. Let Him heal you." Preye was a little hesitant, unsure of what to do. However, as Bola Tito continued to speak, she felt something urging her to accept. It was like a small voice of reassurance. Eventually, Preye decided to accept Jesus into her life that day. She was unsure how Jesus would take the pain and brokenness away, but she was willing to give Him a try, if that meant that this awful feeling would go away. She spent an hour 30 minutes talking with Bola Tito on that bench. Bola Tito shared her story in more detail and the way Jesus carried her through it all. They exchanged phone numbers as Bola Tito was only in Port Harcourt for a conference and will be returning to Lagos later that evening. Preye went back home and already she knew something had changed. The thoughts were still present, but it seemed as though something else had come to combat those thoughts. Something much stronger. Preye and Bola Tito kept in contact and would often pray together. Preye had started her journey with Jesus after her encounter with Bola Tito. She had her ups and downs still. Her mind sometimes would wander again into despair, but again, there seemed to be a stronger force inside of her that could challenge those thoughts. Preye had also joined a local church and had been a member for about 2 months. Although Jesus had come into her life, she knew that she needed to seek help and guidance on how to deal with the lingering issues she had faced. Following Bola Tito's advice, she decided to go for counseling in her church. There, she had regular weekly sessions with Pastor Mrs. Agu, a licensed therapist who was also a pastor in the church. Many issues were uncovered that went even beyond the rape incident. Through their sessions, the circumstances surrounding Preye's deteriorated relationship with her father were uncovered. Through prayer, Preye was able to talk to her father and convince him to come for her counseling sessions. He agreed and they both sat down with Pastor Agu. When they all sat down together, it became clear that both Preye and her father had not properly mourned the death of her mother. Preye now understood that every time her father looked at her, he was reminded of his wife, and this brought deep pain to him. Rather than mourn his wife properly, he took out the grief of her death on Preye. In return, Preye distanced herself from him. For the first time, she saw her father cry. That day, they both forgave each other, received healing, and started a journey to mend their broken relationship. Her father, already a Christian, made a decision that day to renew his walk with God. Preye was amazed and couldn't believe that she and her father would ever be close again. Things had started slowly, but after 6 months, their relationship was mended and healthy again. She sat in her room one day, just worshiping the God who saved her and renewed her hope. She prayed that God will use her to help someone like her, the same way that Bola Tito helped her. It wasn't long after that, Preye started writing and singing songs of hope and healing. She used her gift to minister to women who had suffered sexual violence around her school and community. She thanked God every day, and she knew that He would use her to do greater things.